Fine with me.
Chitravina N.Ravikiran, the great composer, evangelist, musician, composer, vocalist, Chitravina exponent. Somebody who has, I've had an, pleasure of interacting with him a few days back, and I realized that he started his training under his father's guidance, rather his father's, strict disciplinary kind of routines at the age of 2. Thus, that is why I call him the modern age Abhimanyu Amistas. Somebody who started performing at the age of 2. His first performance was at the age of 2, and there is documented evidence on that. Somebody who is not only an expert in that instrument called Chitravina, which is integral and inextricably linked to our classical cultural heritage, Shastriya Sangeet. I'm finding it more and more difficult to move from the word classical to Shastriya Sangeet because of the grammatical and the mathematical aspect imbibed into it, unlike the periodic kind of classification which has been bestowed by the Western world on our heritage and culture in the form of music. Mr. Ravikiran is also somebody credited with a lot of new firsts, including Mel Harmony, the first of its kind, wherein melody and harmony from the Western world and melody from the Indian, traditions has been taken up to an inflection point, and now that is something which has been accepted and endorsed by top institutions globally. First of its kind experiment. This evangelist is also responsible for trying and link music with nature. That is, what we read about and what we've been, as folklores and stories of the ancient ages. We hear Tansen being able to bring rain with the power of his music. That is what Mr. Chitravina ji, Ravikiran ji also, is somebody who is an expert on talking on those kind of influences of music on nature. And as a successive, or rather as a follow-up to that kind of a concept, is something which is very close to his heart. It is about sustainability. He is also the founder of a foundation which works on sustainability issues, which is again one of the major concerns globally. So I would now hand over the baton to the honorable guest to take us forward with his journey of his great illustrious father, without whose persistence, belief, and dedication, today this gentleman would not be what he is. And I have seen most of the musicians talk very highly of their fathers. So one thing is for sure, India's family value systems, the value of that particular family value system is here for all to see in the world, that it is something which has given such great individuals to the world and to the society. Over to you, Chitravina and Ravikiran ji. Take us through your journey, take us through issues we just now spoke of, and also where do you want and how do you want music in India to regain its long lost significance, glory, and it is something which should be used as one of the kind of Tri Shakti. That is, we use Tri Shakti for Army, Navy, and Air Force. Similarly, the soft power of Tri Shakti is yoga, Ayurveda, and music. So this great superpower, soft power, should be used and harnessed for India to reach the epitome of global stardom from all aspects. By the time we reach 2047, people like you are going to drive it. Over to you, Ravikiran ji.
First of all, namaskar to you, Ji. It's a great pleasure for me to be with you as well as your wonderful viewers at Vision India Forum. The kind of series that you're doing with what India is going to be during its centenary year of independence, that is 2047, is very commendable. And the kind of personalities you have been talking to I'm sure that a lot of insights, inputs you have already gleaned by now. And talking about me is one of the most difficult things for me. It's easier for me to talk about things I believe in and all that. But basically, a lot of the things about me since I started my career at the age of 2, I only read about me in newspapers like what I would read about somebody else. Honestly speaking, I don't have too much memories of that. Except the fact that a lot of people used to be there. I used to go travel a bit. I remember the train journeys and the exciting, experience that I had with trains at that age, and the exciting experience being on the stage in front of so many mics, in front of literally, several thousand people. I didn't even know the count of it. But the point is that the credit for all this, as you rightly said, should really go to my father and guru, Chitravina Narasimhan, and of course my mother Chodamani, who played a very, very beautiful supportive role, and the rest of our extended family, including my grandmothers, my aunt, and so many others in my life at that age. So the reason I'm reiterating this is that the kind of vision that my father had, the discipline is one part of it, but the vision, the kind of macro vision, the inspired vision that he brought into this training of me or presenting me at the age of 2 changed the entire cultural landscape of India. Because before 1969, if you take a statistical analysis of how many young artists, performers were there, and if you actually compare that to post 1969 when I was presented, you will see a sea of difference. Literally hundreds and hundreds of parents, especially in the South, the Carnatic world, got inspired by my father's, you know, uh, accomplishments. And they started extrapolating his methods on their own children with varying degrees of success. And today, many of those artists are extremely successful in the field. So I'm personally very, very happy that those parents took a leaf out of my father's book and trained their own children at that right age. Though I think they started presenting their children mostly. Most of the other young artists were performers were presented maybe when they were like 8 or 10 or so, but that is not a problem at all, because they are still successful artists today. They have endured the field and are very successful today, and that is heartening. And now the other part of it is, of course, my father uh, met a lot of media anticipation. There are literally newspapers who were even going to the extent of labeling me some kind of an avatar of my grandfather, who was a great musician himself, Gotwadi Narayaningar. And all these kind of speculations are happening. The artists were talking. I was blessed by so many great artists at that age. But then my father told everyone that it's not just nature, it's also nurture. And he actually made a declaration that he'll present me as a full-fledged performing vocalist. That means like 2-hour concert with top accompanists at the age of 5. And he did this. So he presented me in 1972 when I was 5 years old in several concerts for the next 4 or 5 years with extremely great artists like, say, Viku Vinayakaram on the Ghatam, Madurai Krishningar on Mridangam, Khandadevi Adagiraswamy, Tiruparagadal, Veeraraghavan, Gauram Mangathar, all these big names, they all accompanied me in those concerts, encouraged me. So I was very fortunate to be performing with such brilliant artists at that age. And then again, when my voice started changing, I went on to the Chitravina, which was there in my family. Gotvadyam is also known as. So I was fascinated by this, mainly because my father himself would get up at about 3 or 4 in the morning, and almost till night 10 or 11, we would be immersed in music. In fact, I went to school only in my 4th standard. Until then, I was homeschooled. So we literally had 18, 19 hours exclusively devoted to music. Maybe even take out 2, 3 hours for other activities. You still have a good 16 hours only with music. And that's a kind of Gurukula. When we talk about Gurukula, this is very rare for us to have current day artists who had that experience, because my father happened to be my guru. But the moment he came into the music room, he was no longer my father. That seriousness, that entire ambience, that entire atmosphere, the very equation between the two of us will change in a flash. He'll become the guru, I'll become the student. And no quarter asked nor given. you know. And that kind of training that I got, he made music very exciting. He didn't fry my brains by continuously making me sing or play against my will or anything. He just made it so exciting that I was automatically gravitated towards that great art form. And I heard such brilliant artists. He would make me listen to great artists of both Carnatic and Hindustani. So everything we had very organic build up, whether it was melody, rhythm, lyrics in different languages, because Carnatic is very rich in lyrics. You have compositions in Sanskrit, Tamil, Telugu, Kannada, sometimes in Hindi. You also take compositions from Bengali or Gujarati and other languages, sometimes in Carnatic concerts. So it's a very rich tradition of literature. So the way my father would teach these songs, he would teach the meanings, the spirit of them, and the stories behind them. So the amount of knowledge that I got would actually, I'm actually telling my students that the amount of knowledge a very, very good musician would have would rival that of the best professionals in any walk of life. If you are a truly good musician, you will have the same amount of terabytes of knowledge in your head, which would be, equal to the greatest scientists, mathematicians, or astrophysicists, or cosmologists, or anybody in that you can think of, doctors, or anyone that you can think of. Thus, that is a kind of pursuit that my father put me on. That for more than the glamour of being a child prodigy or anything, it's the amount of knowledge that I was able to get that was so exciting, and the way it was presented was so beautiful that even a child would be able to get so much more than, say, somebody who is like 4 or 5 times his age, in that short period. That is the teaching methods of my father. It really straddled the areas of not only just teaching music, but also infant education, infant child psychology, so many other kinds of disciplines. Everything was blended organically in that, which is what I'm very grateful for.
That's the initial incubation period. But then when we talk about your journey as a musician, take us through the various phases and various uh, shades of your personality as a musician, vocalist, composer, veena expert, lyricist. I mean, please take us through those shades.
See, basically everything is organic. Really speaking, they are all interconnected. In Indian music, even if you wanted to be a good instrumentalist, the gurus would insist that you learn some vocal. And if you wanted to be a vocalist, some of them would also insist you learn a good instrument also, like especially string instruments. So one complements the other. So in my case, whatever I was taught to sing, I was also organically able to play it on this instrument. The Chitravina is one of the easiest instruments to learn, but one of the most difficult to master. Because unlike a sitar or a guitar or other things, it doesn't have frets. So you have to almost be blind when you play it, in the sense that you're just having a slide that you glide on the instrument. You would have probably seen some videos of that. So when you are playing with that slide, it has to be micrometer perfect, nanometer, whatever way you want to call it. So if it is not placed in the exact position, you will get a wrong note or an incorrect note. So for the kind of precision it demands is huge, but at the same time, the scope it gives is also tremendous. And almost anything you sing, you can play on this instrument to a reasonable degree. And that's why it's called the singing instrument. In fact, there is a review in New York Times which actually said that the concept on this instrument reminded that critic of, infinitesimal shading, so reminiscent of the human voice. So the Chitravina's reputation as a singing instrument is literally global and very well deserved. And for me, playing that was very exciting because it has 21 strings. It used to have a rich tonality to it. The very tone would attract me when my father was playing on it. And I had never seen my grandfather, but heard some of his recordings. He was really the legend on this instrument. He's the one who took it to the concert stage, and the stature that he gave for this instrument was international, even in the 20s and 30s. He was one of the few people who had toured outside India to Singapore, Malaysia, and all those things in that era, and performed. So that kind of tradition that we had, I was very, very interested in this instrument. So playing that was very organic. Similarly, the way in which my father taught me the compositions of other great composers, it's like storytelling class. So when I learned a song, I would know so many stories. I would hear so many stories that are connected to that song or embedded within that song. And that made me very deeply passionate about all these languages that I compose in today, whether it is Sanskrit or Hindi or Tamil or Telugu, Kannada, and all this. So, me being a composer, I actually compose the entire music, rhythm, and lyrics together only. Even yesterday, I was composing a piece on Varanasi, actually, on the Kashi Vishwanatha, god of Varanasi, Vishweshwar. So, even that was in Sanskrit. So, this kind of passionately, once you are involved in this, and once you actually appreciate the works of other great musicians, other great composers, the legends and the thinkers and the philosophers and the saints, then automatically you are like a small satellite reflecting the light that you get from them. And that's all my journey as a composer is.
What has been your experience performing, in India and abroad, and what are the areas you have really performed? What are the countries that you have toured? And, what has been your experience about the reception of Indian music? And how many years have you been performing in India and abroad, especially as at a professional level?
No, ever since I started at the age of 2, I've been a professional. In fact, people used to pay to watch me or have me on the thing. So I was literally a professional from that age. I was very lucky that way. But on the vocal also, I was performing all over the country until my 10th year. Then when my voice changed, I went to Chitravina and I started performing when I was about 12 or so on this instrument. And I was very lucky because I was given direct gradation by the All India Radio when I was 12. And without giving any audition or something those days, which is like absolutely unprecedented almost. And then by the time I was 15, I played the audition and got an A grade, which is again uh, rare because you are not even allowed to give audition until you're 18 or something in those days. So I got an A grade when I was 15, and then soon I started getting opportunities to visit other countries in my teens. So I have been very lucky to have visited dozens and dozens of countries, almost all the continents except Africa and Antarctica. I've been able to travel North America, South America, Europe, of course, Australia, New Zealand, all these places, Japan. You think of the country, I've been able to go there and take my music there, which is a huge privilege for me. And I was probably the first to introduce Indian classical music in some countries like Slovenia or Slovakia, Croatia, and some of these places probably. They have never heard of Indian music at that time. So again, it's a huge privilege. All I can say is that I'm thankful to have had the opportunity to perform in some of the greatest festivals, along with very, very great legends who are also very supportive and encouraging
So, I
from the
mean,
time.
essentially, if we have to, classify Mr. Ravikiran as, it would be a vocalist, a Chitravina exponent, or would it be a lyricist? What would it be? What has been your professional kind of expertise in which particular area the most which you have performed in across the world?
I started as a vocalist, but I switched over to Chitravina. So Chitravina was rare. So that became sort of tagged with me. So I started getting known as Chitravina Ravikiran. In those days, it was called Go to Adim, so it was known as Go to Adim Ravikiran. Then when we brought the original traditional name, I have been Chitravina Ravikiran. So that name is really not mine. It's actually the instrument I've been named after. So it's a name that the public gave. They sort of nicknamed me like Chitravina Ravikiran. Probably for a convenience to separate me from the other Ravikirans in the planet, but that became my identity. So I'm always known for that. But even today, I'm very passionate about vocal. And my first passion is, of course, to perform because you are able to take your music directly to the audience as the performer. And then the next organic thing that happens naturally to me is a composer. So composing, I started composing when I was about 12 or so, seriously, songs. And that is very, very natural to me by God's grace. And I'm very passionate about that even today. So it just happens most of the times. And then the third biggest passion of mine is to pass on this knowledge to others, which is as an educator. So that is the third part of me, because I was like how do you want to say it? Like a diamond collector, like a jewel collector. I collected these diamonds, which are the beautiful compositions of our culture. So I collected it from so many different sources. Apart from my father, I learned from one of the greatest legends, T. Brinda, fantastic vocalist, who was hailed as a musician by all the legends. So I learned from her several masterpieces. So it is my responsibility and my passion to send this music out, disseminate this knowledge that I have. And today, if you go check out something called acharyanet.com, you will see a lot of my lessons are there online for students from any part of the world to benefit by. Similarly, a lot of my own compositions are there in the YouTube channel called Chitravina Ravikiran Compositions Collaborations. And then Melharmony, which you mentioned, which is my collaborations with other cultures. That is there. A lot of information is there in melharmonymusic.com. Even though I am credited with having introduced this concept of Melharmony to the world, which is a conjugation of melody plus harmony. So the melodic system of the East blending with the harmonic traditions of the West in a very unique manner, not in the usual sense. So even though I was credited with having started that, the real Sir Robert Morris of the Eastern School of Music. So Melharmony was developed a lot by him also. So that's the reason it is also academically accepted. We have had Melharmony courses in several universities, Melharmony concerts with BBC Philharmonic or Wisconsin Chamber Orchestra, so many different orchestras in the world. We have had the concerts. So all these are my passion. Then I also write. I've written books on music appreciation as well as music education. Then, of course, I speak, lecture a lot. And then, as you rightly mentioned, my passion is also environment. I've been doing a lot of work on that. I founded this organization, NGO called Planet Symphony. It's people think that because I'm a musician, it's a symphony of music. It's not. It's actually a symphony of the people for the planet. So we have got musicians, scientists, climatologists, other brilliant experts from all walks of life who are a part of Planet Symphony. And we have been doing a lot of climate literacy and action programs, which are pure environmental things. For example, we had a climate conclave just on the 15th of June, which was attended by top environmental scientists from many parts of India, as well as a couple of them from the US. So we are actually pushing for a lot of climate action at various levels. So that's also very equal passion of mine. And one more thing which I have to also say as my passion is music and wellness. So I started this field called musopathy, which is different from music therapy. So musopathy is like allopathy and all that, very precise kind of approach through sound vibrations, which are not culture-centric or region-centric. So it's a very different thing. And I'm very happy to share with you that musopathy clinical trials recently proved that this kind of tonation breathing techniques that I introduced can bring down blood pressure by more than 7 points. So there is an experiment in Gujarat by the Charusat University, which just came out with that result about 2 weeks back. So I'm very happy to share that with you.
This is, the musopathy, even, in criminology, is one of the most effective ways to kind of, treat or rehabilitate mentally ill, especially the serial kind of, offenders. It's also something which Mozart used, and Mozart's music is also used very much in the West for such kind of treatments from a kind of a judiciary perspective as well. Now, Chitravina ji, yeah, you have something to say?
Yeah. actually, Mozart's music was also experimented by the San Diego University many years back, probably in the 80s, late 80s, when they actually had a bunch of children listen to Mozart's music and proved that those who heard it were able to do better in their exams. So that is more like a music related experiment. Uh, but then the questions will start coming: why not Tansen's music? Why not Tyagaraja's music or something? So it's not a conclusive kind of observation. When you say Mozart, then you are sort of throwing the door wide open for other composers to also be studied, right? And then music from other cultures to be studied. Why not some African music, or why not Chinese music, or Japanese music, or Korean music, or anything, right? So the studies, those kind of studies are generally not conclusive. Whereas what I'm talking is about a very standardized scientific approach where you are studying the vibrations. For the vibrations that either you are listening to or the ones that you are creating yourselves. So those are like absolutely now accepted by a lot of scientists across the world as a very precise way of approaching music therapy and music even as a wellness tool. So it's a very promising field with a lot of potential if it is done well, musopathy as such.
What is the role that Indian music can play in attracting tourism in the country?
I think that Indian music, the way it has been received across the world, will show you that people from any age group, any background, any region, they all are absolutely captivated by the amazing melodic variety that we have, the kind of variety we have in rhythms also. So Indian music is already very popular throughout the world. So if the tourism industry can really tap onto our music and link tourism and music in a more meaningful manner, in a more dynamic, proactive manner, then I think tourism can really increase exponentially. And that should be linked to major festivals and major tourist centers, which should always be having concerts. Now, for example, if you go to Washington, D.C., for instance, if you actually go to the Smithsonian and some of these other centers, there will be concerts every day that's happening that is open to tourists. Like that, some of our greatest centers should have concerts every day that's happening. The closest that came to doing this was Tirupati, where 365 days a year there is a concert happening right opposite the temple, which is free for all, open to everyone. So this kind of thing we need to start introducing in many other places. And those concerts should give opportunities to youngsters who are probably not even professionals but talented. And every week there should be a concert by top professionals also, which is like a special event. So that means about 50 concerts a year by top professionals in each of these great tourist centers. So that becomes like a ritualistic kind of thing that people start expecting. And it should be done in a way that the whole world looks forward to that. So if it's, say, Varanasi or near Agra, Taj Mahal, or the centers in South India like say Kanchipuram or Madurai and so many of these places. Many of our tourist centers are also closely linked to pilgrimage centers, right? So both of these things are connected. And if you collect music also and dance, of course, it can exponentially bring revenues to this country.
The Incredible India campaign that was run by the Ministry of Tourism, basically one of the former ministers, Mr. KJ Alphonse, had explained to me that we didn't want to have a single logo or a campaign for Incredible India globally, because every country had a different tourism need and India had something for every country. So that is how they wanted to market this entire Incredible India campaign. From a music perspective, since you guys are globally well traveled, well exposed to the entire world's expectations and their kind of something, their kind of desire or their kind of ecosystem, what they want, what they like in their country, and Indian music definitely would be having something for each of them. Is there something like that which can be documented, if not already? And if that can be done, can we probably strategize from that perspective to market Indian classical music or Indian Shastriya Sangeet more effectively globally, or probably have concerts and events and festivals in India which cater to such kind of continental or country-specific requirements, and then that particular country could be a huge source of forex for the country in India for us, because we would be organizing such festivals based on the same concept as Incredible India was.
A very good idea. See, the main thing is in the 80s, 90s, the government started doing something called Festival of India in other countries. So, for example, there was Festival of India in France, in Germany, in Switzerland, in Holland, and other US and other places, even Moscow in USSR and all those in those days, erstwhile USSR. And then in 1997, they again did a bunch of beautiful events across the world in so many different countries, sending our cultural delegations to various countries to celebrate the golden jubilee of India's independence. So those kind of things were happening. And at that time, we had the experience of performing for many, many listeners across Europe or other countries, right? So typically speaking, as an artist, I think that many of them will be able to enjoy our music as it is. Because if you try to start marketing it, tailoring it to different countries, it's almost going to be a no-win situation, because many of these countries, even though they are separated by national borders, the music that they have been exposed to has been almost the same. If you're looking at the Western world, for instance, the classical Western music is the same, whether it's in Europe or in US, and many parts of China and Japan are also exposed to that kind of music. So Korea and all this, they are all exposed to Western classical music. And some of them are exposed to their own native systems also. So one thing which I would really like to see happening is that in many countries, they have festivals named after cities. Now, for example, Brisbane International Festival, Sydney Festival, Melbourne Festival. All these festivals are there in different countries. Chicago Festival, Madison Festival. All these cities, they run festivals. So like this, some of the major Indian cities start running festivals. And that becomes like international, because you start inviting artists from other countries also. You start giving them a stake to perform in this country. You host them, and then you have the return kind of thing happening. So when you host a superstar artist in a kind of a festival that is considered prestigious even by them to perform here, you make a Delhi festival that should become like the worldwide name for people to want to come and perform here. The top celebrities should want to come and be here on this stage. So you start creating that kind of an ecosystem, then more of the tourists from those countries will start flocking to these festivals, because these festivals become like the hub for them also. So if we are able to do these kind of things, I think that will be a huge thing. Second thing that we need to do is have more collaborations between Indian musicians and those artists. Suppose you are having Indian and Chinese artists perform together in a collaborative manner. So then you are catering to both audiences, both the Indian diaspora or Indian listeners as well as the Chinese listeners. And when you say Chinese, it includes a lot of that allied cultures also. So this is one more way for us to start getting those countries enjoying a stake in our music. And then we also built a whole ecosystem of mutual appreciation of the arts, which is what I've been trying to do through Melharmony, by the way. So when I do Melharmony with Western jazz musicians, I bring jazz audiences as well as Indian audiences on the same platform. I bring the Western classical audiences, and here, for example, a concert in Madison, we had more than 45, 50,000 people listen to some of the greatest Indian composers, because we performed Muthuswami Dikshitar's works along with Mozart and Beethoven. So there were listeners of both who came to that concert. And many of them were hearing for the first time Sanskrit compositions being performed by a Western orchestra. So that's a kind of ecosystem that I would like to see.
See, India has a huge, kind of population, 140 crores. And, this classical music, this art is restricted to a very minuscule percentage, at least people who understand. So how do you think that this can be popularized in India going forward? What are the steps that the government can take to make, grammatical music, Indian Shastriya Sangeet, something which becomes part and parcel of regular routine life of every Indian, at least now till we reach 2047?
Very good question. In fact, I have been doing this kind of thing because I started uh, coming from a perspective that music by itself, just because it's called Shastriya Sangeet, just because it has grammar, doesn't mean it has no aesthetics or mass appeal. When we say grammar, we start conditioning the minds of the general masses, thinking is very inaccessible to them. That's not right at all. Something having, now, for example, English has grammar, but you see millions and millions of English novels being sold by everyone, not because they are having grammar, doesn't mean that they don't have mass appeal. Now, if you're going to shoot a film, there is so much of technique involved in shooting a film, right? And you still have mega hit films happening. So anything with grammar is not necessarily beyond the reach of the masses. And this is where I came from in 1991 or so. I started actually something called rural empowerment through music and arts, because I knew that there are a lot of talented children in the rural areas who are not just given an opportunity to learn music because they had been conditioned to think that these are very difficult for them. So when I went to a school, they had 800 students, of which 160 of them wanted to learn music. We gave them voice tests and determined that they had some basic ability. So we started a scheme to train them. So recently, I was also invited by the Honorable Prime Minister Shri Narendra Modi ji for a meeting where we discussed this particular scheme. Uh, I requested that the government starts schemes just like the Western countries to introduce music at the mass level in schools. So when you introduce it to millions and millions of people, at least 1% of them will become very, very good artists. Maybe about 5% will become more than average, above average artists. 10-15% will become average artists. Another 15% will become good teachers. Another 15-20% will become very good promoters of the art. And the rest of them will become very good listeners. So you are developing an ecosystem where you are having that kind of numbers come into play in a very organic manner. And the Honorable Prime Minister himself was very receptive to this. And I think probably in the near future, the government will be able to bring in this kind of schemes, which is going to make our music more widespread in the world. And I should also point out that even the previous government had that kind of idea, and I was the only musician in that committee which was there for music education in schools. So I'm hoping that these schemes will be revived by governments across political lines, and our culture will become enriched by visionary leaders.
What is the essential difference between the Hindustani and Carnatic style of music, if at all there is?
See, the difference is just like the accent of the same language spoken in different parts. The notes are the same, the alphabets are the same, and the concept of raga, tala, all these are common to both these systems. It's just the way the notes are handled in Carnatic and the kind of ornamentation that you give. Now, in Hindustani music, it's more long, plain notes because there was a lot of Persian influence in the north. So that music is a combination of the Indo-Persian kind of thinking and delivery. Whereas in Carnatic music, it was more a combination of the Sanskrit and the Tamil cultures. So the Tamil culture was extremely evolved when it comes to music. And so their kind of vocalization, the kind of syllabalization that they used to bring into their music, that has also become part of Carnatic music. So when you sing the same notes of the same raga, you will hear different ways in which they are rendered by these exponents. And then, of course, you also have different instruments in the north, sitar and sarod and shenai or sarangi and all this. In the south, you have veena, violin, chitravina. Flute, of course, is common to both instruments. You have the mridangam here, ghatam, kanjira, mosing, all that. There you have the tabla, pakhawaj, and all that. So the way of expression is also different. So there are two systems which sort of got bifurcated around the 1300s. and now they are two distinctive streams in our culture.
What role has the Mughal, rule, or the Mughal? What influence have the Mughals had on Indian music? Because Tansen, as we know, is synonymous with music as far as music is concerned. Our Shastriya Sangeet is concerned. I'm sure Shastriya Sangeet is probably as old, if not older, as the Vedas. That is what somebody told me. Because it's all about grammars, language. Most people, feel. There is no conclusivity about many things, but at the same time, we can be dead sure that yes, it was there before the Mughal era also. But just throw some light on the genesis of music in India in brief, and then probably the question automatically gets answered about Tansen and the role or the impact and influence of the Mughal era on Indian music till date.
See, it is well accepted that the music originated from the Samaveda among the four Vedas. The Samaveda is considered to be like the mother of music. And definitely after that, there have been phenomenal musicologists. Even then, the Shastra was developed very well. In fact, if you actually were to analyze this, music is the only subject in India that was classified as one of the 64 arts and also one of the 10 sciences. So it was both an art and a science, even in that era. So music has always been there. And if you see the era of Islam itself started much, much later than when music was there. So there's no doubt about that. But definitely Indian music in the north especially has been impacted by the I would say, quote unquote, guests from the Persian region as well. And in some ways that has been very healthy, I would say, because culture at the end of the day is beyond politics or beyond religion or region and all these kind
Why
of things.
Tansen? Even, this question comes up automatically. Why Tansen and why not Shankaracharya?
No. See, Shankaracharya was more a philosopher than a musician. Tansen in the north is hailed, but in the south, you have Tyagaraja, Dikshitar, Purandaradasa, Jayadeva from the east, and then you have so many other great composers from each region who enriched our culture. So it's not like,
And
so
that
if you look
was,
at,
and these names are from which era?
sorry,
These names are from
I couldn't
which
hear you.
era?
Oh, see, if you are looking at Tansen,
The oldest
before
musicologist that comes to your mind or knowledge uh, in the Vedic era, or probably somewhere near, who would that be?
Bharata who wrote the Natya Shastra,
Who?
Bharata Muni. Bharata wrote the Natya Shastra. That is around 2300 years ago or so. Okay, can you hear me? Hello,
Yeah, I can
is
hear
my
you.
volume clear? Yeah, so Bharata wrote the Natya Shastra almost 2300 years before, and he actually cites another person called Dattila, who was even older than him. Similarly, in the south, you had the ancient Tamil cultures. You had brilliant musical treatises written by Tamil musicologists, and those have been very, very popular as well in this region. And they were very evolved, highly scientific. So both of these were very evolved. And then you have a continuous tradition of different composers and others happening in both north and south. But then when you come to Tansen, you are almost talking about just 500 years before, okay, during Akbar's period, right?
So another
And
case of positioning, probably that we are used to, we've got accustomed to, and that's become part of our, normal, kind of conversation. Whenever we have to refer to somebody as a musician, we say, "Look at him. Look at the Tansen coming. Look at the great Tansen." We
yes,
should
yes, yes, yes.
is also something which is again a fallacious kind of positioning which we have been bestowed with by the dispensations that have ruled this country for years, because the textbooks is what we read, and the textbooks have always positioned Tansen as the somebody who is synonymous with music in India.
But nothing wrong with that because Tansen was a great artist. There's no questioning, no taking away from Tansen as a great artist. But he was great in that region, of course. So if you come to say East, Jayadeva was much before Tansen actually. Jayadeva is
Henceforth,
revered extremely throughout the world.
and he is
But
from, he was from,
Jayadeva is from Bengal. No, he was Bengal Orissa. He wrote the Ashtapadi, and then you have in the south you have Purandaradasa, who is worshipped as the father of Carnatic music.
is there any books to your knowledge which has been documented by any one of you guys? Because you seem to have done so much for music. But have you ever thought of penning your thoughts with respect to this particular aspect of the synonymous, legends with music of Akhand Bharat? Because then probably a
Yes,
lot of myths.
lot of people have already done that. Actually, see, I am not so much even a competent historian, but a lot of people have documented some of the greatest artists and composers from all parts of Bharat. There is no doubt at all about that.
Any three,
Maharashtra, you had Tukaram.
any three
You know,
books? Sant Tukaram.
Sant Tukaram was fantastic. His songs are even rendered today. Similarly, there was Jnanadev, Namdev, so many other poets from that side. Here in the south, you had Purandaradasa, Tyagaraja, Muthuswami Dikshitar, Uthigad Venkatakavi, Chama Shastri, dozens and dozens of composers, Annamacharya in the Andhra Pradesh, Swati Tirunal in Kerala. Any region you take, there have been brilliant composers, brilliant thinkers, brilliant philosophers who have enriched this country. They have taken the country forward. And some of them, now, for example, Tansen is more popular in the north, but if you come to south, you will actually see Purandaradasa and Tyagaraja as the most influential composers that you talk about here all the time.
And they were
So,
2000 years before.
sorry,
They
I couldn't hear
they
you.
existed 2000 years before.
No, Tansen himself is only about 500 years back. So you are talking about
Tyagaraja and Purandradas.
Tyagaraja again is like 1767 to 1847. Uthigad Venkatakavi is 1700 to 1765. Purandaradasa is 1484 to 1564. Annamacharya is 1409 to 1509. Jayadeva is even earlier than all of these people. Then you had Narayana Tirtha. You had so many other great composers who have been there continuously in the tradition of music. Tulsidas was considered a fantastic lyricist whose bhajans are sung even today. Surdas was sung. So many of them. Actually, Tansen was not even a composer so much. You don't have lyrics of his. But whereas Meera, Tulsi, Kabir, Surdas, all these have lyrics. So their music is set, music has been set for them. So you sing those things also. So people
Any
who have the
any
holistic
three books,
pictures, they worship all this.
any three books you would recommend if you have in mind for this kind of a study?
See, I think today actually there are so many sources of knowledge. Uh, for example, if you really go to some university textbooks, they would cover the music of the entire country, you know. So there'll be good starting points for many people. But in terms of music appreciation, I wrote appreciating Carnatic music. So somebody who wants to learn more about Carnatic can come and read that book. In fact, it was one of the first books ever written for Indian music appreciation. And I was very lucky that Sri R.K. Narayan proofread that book for me. And R.K. Lakshmanji did the cover for that book. So I was able to focus more on that system. But there are similar books. Now, if you were to listen to read some of the books for North Indian music, I'm sure people like Bhat Kandeji, or if you go to some of this Vishnu Digambar festival and all that, you will see some of their institutions having excellent books for Hindustani music. So like this, there are a lot of resources available, even online today, actually.
So when the government is now pushing, so we can continue this, and this will be a quite interesting
Yeah,
chat.
yeah,
And
yeah,
we'll go on. So
yeah.
we'll have to now end, but then we'll end on this note that the government should now take this issue of including the culture and tourism thing soon, as fast as possible in the concurrent list, because that is how probably the sector will benefit, the country will benefit, and each region, like unlike in the past, wherein there has been this kind of inconclusive and positioning of kind of particular names. Instead of that, we will have a holistic view, and the nation will obviously benefit if we have a more comprehensive and holistic view about the genesis of our music, instead of having a shallow and kind of marketed knowledge that has been imposed on us over years. People like you, Chitravina and Ravikiranji, will serve this particular purpose a long way, in more ways than one. If you can continue all these various activities, and no one such activity will suffice the purpose. We have to have all guns basically roaring, all guns firing. Only then we will ensure that India is able to reclaim its glory. And then probably we'll soon have a day when the Prime Minister, whosoever he is or she is that time, by at least 2047, also thinks of music as the third most important strength of the country, or not in a kind of chronological order, but definitely as one of the three Shaktis, which needs to be positioned like they have done for yoga, and made the world accept 21st June, which incidentally is also a day which is currently celebrated as the World Music Day, as was patronized by France. So I'm sure India has a lot to offer in terms of having an international Music Day also, to be soon concretized from a United Nations perspective, which is one of the reasons why we are driving this music sub-series in the Vision Amrit Kal series. And some kind of a underwriting petition, or some kind of a document which can be served with the Prime Minister for getting this particular proposal also initiated, wherein India has its own day, which rather than having it in fragments as heritage, intangible cultural heritage being accepted for Chau dance, for Durga Puja, etc., etc., we should have Indian classical music holistically being accepted as intangible cultural heritage of the world. Only then, I believe that India will probably, reach its potential in positioning India's soft power as the third and the most important strength that we need to position, so that this particular strength of ours is accepted, recognized. Sorry, Raviji, there was a slight technical glitch.
Yeah,
Thank you so much. Thank you, Raviji, for joining us.
Absolutely pleasure.
You are an institution. This country should learn from you and take advantage of your huge experience, knowledge, and the kind of legacy that you bring on board, the kind of lineage that you bring on board. Kudos to you and your family. Jai Hind, Namaskar.
Thank you very much. It's been an absolute pleasure to be with you. Just to respond to the last point that you are making, I'm very, very much in concurrence with you that we need to do a lot for our culture. In fact, I'm very happy that the Honorable Prime Minister was sharing with me that he wanted to bring in a lot of more of art and music into the NEP, the New Education Policy. So I'm hoping that all this will really happen soon in our country. And our school children, millions and millions of our talented children will get an opportunity to be able to excel in arts as well, just like they are getting opportunities to excel in science or technology or sports and all that. So I'm hoping that we will see this Amrit Kal continue for a long time. Thank you.
I'm
Namaste.
sure we will soon have a show when we will invite Dr. Kasturi Ranganji, who is the chairman of who was the chairman architect of the NEP, and currently he is the chairman of the NCF, National Curriculum Framework, currently touring to the United States for his personal visit. Once he's back, we'll definitely have him on the show with a few top musicians like you, so that you can tell him your views, and probably then that could be inculcated in the new curriculum frameworks, and suggestions can be taken forward by the man who is driving the education policy for India for the next few decades. Thank you, sir. Thank you again. We look
Great
forward
idea.
to meeting you again.
Thank you so much, G. Great pleasure. Namaste.